Girlfriend's ex-coworkers contacted me to say she cheated on me 3 years ago. My girlfriend and I have been together for 6 years. We are in our mid to late 20s and are now considering purchasing a house together and starting a family. When we first met, she was shy and lacked a real friend group, and it has primarily been just the two of us since the beginning. She rarely goes out with friends, and neither do I. We have always enjoyed one another's company. I was her first boyfriend, as well as the first person to spend the night with her, and our relationship has been smooth since day one. 3 years ago, she worked in a high-end fashion store for about 6 months, during which time they were taken to a fashion show in Italy. Shortly after returning, she left the job just a few weeks later. I never had any doubts or concerns about her behavior during that trip. Recently, an old coworker of hers, who is male, reached out to me unexpectedly last week and mentioned that my girlfriend and her boss, an older man, overweight, bald, and about 5 feet 6 inches tall, missed the fashion show, and when they reconvened for dinner afterward, my girlfriend and her boss left early without a valid explanation. He also said they were both assigned rooms on the same hotel floor, while the rest of the staff stayed on a different floor. When my girlfriend left her job, her boss held a meeting with all the employees, claiming he had to fire her due to her defiance and their frequent arguments. However, the coworker stated that he had never witnessed them argue and that she consistently complied with her boss's requests, just like the other employees. The coworker is not interested in women, so I knew it was not a case of jealousy. I remained skeptical and brushed him off with a curt reply, but this morning, a female coworker who used to give her rides to and from work messaged me to confirm that everything the first coworker said was accurate. They felt compelled to tell me after seeing my girlfriend's posts about us wanting to buy a house together. I haven't yet brought this up with her because our relationship has been so wonderful until now, and I am in disbelief. Is there any reasonable explanation other than my girlfriend in her early 20s being unfaithful with an unattractive older man? I am trying to summon the courage to confront her, but want to be sure before making such an accusation. Update: I haven't spoken to her about it yet due to conflicting work schedules, but I met a close friend of mine, who is familiar with her family, and shared the situation with him. He was understandably shocked, but also jumped to the conclusion of infidelity. He recalled something that felt off regarding her behavior a year ago, which seemed unusual for her, and he had convinced himself it was nothing. At a family gathering I did not attend, he said she became very intoxicated early on, left the bar, and returned an hour and a half later in a taxi, explaining she had to rush home. He didn't question it further, but upon seeing me pick her up afterward, he wondered why I had not brought her back earlier. I had been at home that entire evening waiting to collect her, and was certain she did not go home for any reason. I chose not to go because I thought she could use some time to socialize without me. My friend insinuated he suspected she might have left to purchase drugs, but the event was not conducive to that, and the girlfriend I know would never even consider taking drugs, let alone running off in a cab in front of everyone to get some. Furthermore, we pool our finances, and I would have noticed any expenditure, particularly because buying a new dress and attending the party had already been a financial burden. Additionally, since my last message and the replies I've received, I have done some further investigating and discovered that her search history included, to my astonishment, adult videos featuring older men. She searched this 4 different times in a week, alongside searching for anal plugs, which indicate a confirmed order. I have never heard her mention anything regarding adult toys or that she consumed any form of adult entertainment. I know people will argue that none of this is definitive evidence of infidelity, but at this point, I feel as though I have not been sufficiently critical of various aspects of our relationship, despite everything seeming perfect. Perhaps I've been too infatuated over the past 6 years, but it feels like some clues were always in front of me that I simply overlooked. I plan to talk to her tonight, but genuinely, she tends to share everything with me, so why would she not disclose her kinks, or why would she lie about needing to leave the party? After 6 years together, it is hard to believe she would not tell me if she left due to something as embarrassing as diarrhea. I am hesitant to speak with anyone else about this situation, fearing they might provide more troubling insight. Regardless of whether infidelity occurred, I feel this may be the end for us, especially given how much I feel I don't truly know her after these revelations, particularly in the last 2 days. Update: we had a conversation, and it did not go well. She was confronted with the information and denied everything, leading to a significant argument where I told her I was leaving. Therefore, it is over. Since then, she has reached out and asked if we could try again, suggesting the possibility of an open relationship, making me feel as though I never genuinely knew who she was. Final update: many of you are still asserting it could have been sexual assault and emphasize the uncertainty of it all. My previous update was brief due to the intensity of my emotions at the time. We initiated the discussion by me asking her about the coworkers and if she still maintained contact with them. She confirmed that she does, particularly with the female coworker who had messaged me. When I showed her both messages, she denied everything. There was no mention of assault or misconduct on her part. She insisted that she did attend the fashion show, did not leave the dinner early, and claimed there was no truth to what they communicated to me. However, I knew this was not accurate, as one of the coworkers had a saved memory on Snapchat from the dinner and the fashion show, in addition to messages to my girlfriend expressing concern about their unusual hotel arrangements. When I presented this evidence, she became highly defensive and attempted to dispute my proof, but could not substantiate her version of events. When I raised the topic of her departing the party in a cab, as our mutual friend had informed me, she stated she didn't recall where she went and continued to assert she never left the gathering. She claimed the searches for adult toys and the videos were things she intended to discuss with me, as she wanted to introduce role play and toys into our intimate life, although she maintained those searches were not recent and that the order for the toy was delivered. However, I have never seen this item, and it is not among her belongings, which leads me to suspect it may be at another man's residence. When I left, she indicated that she understood my decision, even though she never admitted to any wrongdoing. That's when she expressed a desire for us to reconcile under various circumstances, including the possibility of an open relationship. Following this conversation, she shared plans to take a solo trip to the United Kingdom. I consulted with the coworkers, and it was confirmed that her boss would not be accompanying her, so it seems she is not continuing an affair with him. However, she might have another partner or simply be traveling alone. I am unsure. Regardless, I believe this chapter is closing for me, and I am left to process my emotions regarding the entire situation, which feels surreal. Story 2. My husband, 34M, has developed a very bad panic disorder. We are separated as I live in London while he returned home to his parents in Turkey until he recovers from anxiety. We've been together for 6 years. I am 35F, and we married in June. I got married in June 2024. After 4 months, my husband, 34 years old, developed a panic disorder and frequent episodes of derealization. As his family lives in Turkey, he returned there to seek medical assistance and has stayed there for the past 3 months to recover. This has been extremely challenging for him. In the first month, he couldn't leave his room or go outside alone, with many days passing when he couldn't shower or enter certain rooms like the kitchen due to anxiety and the fear of having a panic attack. He is taking medication, including Nervium and selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and is seeing a therapist regularly. He is making concerted efforts to recover by reading books on the disorder and experimenting with various therapeutic methods. I understand how hard this is for him, but it has also been incredibly difficult for me. When we got married, he was focused on his startup and made it clear that work was important to him and that a honeymoon would come later. We visited a Greek island after our wedding in Turkey so I could enjoy the beach while he worked. Unfortunately, those days spent on the beach alone were really disheartening for me. I felt pain every time I was without him, but I knew I couldn't change the situation, so I just suppressed it. We spent an additional 2 months living with his parents in Istanbul before returning to London. There were days when we stayed at a friend's place on another island in Turkey across from Istanbul. Some days I stayed there alone, while he returned home seeking better working conditions, such as air conditioning. Even though I understood his need to work, I couldn't help but feel upset and heartbroken that the man I married wasn't spending the time with me that I desired. We rarely experienced any intimacy, leaving me feeling unloved, unwanted, misunderstood, and empty. Whenever I expressed my distress over his work commitments, he would urge me to understand his situation. But he could never fully comprehend my pain, even when I was crying. I am extremely unhappy in the relationship, as the affection, love, and intimacy I seek are simply unfulfilled. He does not want to kiss or engage in sexual activity, and it is now evident that his panic disorder has led to severe intimacy issues. In addition to all of this, I face significant challenges with his mother. There was an incident a month before the wedding where she told me she had shown my picture to an energy healer, who claimed that my eyes indicated I was traumatized. She then turned to my mother and said that she was also traumatized from the war. This was the most painful and humiliating comment she could have made to me and my mother, especially at a restaurant. My family endured tremendous suffering, and she has no understanding of the pain that war inflicts and its lasting emotional effects. Discussing my trauma with another person, whom I interpret as a clairvoyant, and telling me this just before my marriage to her son, was a clear sign that she was seeking something to fix. Her belief that I need to be fixed is humiliating, insulting, and degrading. I confronted her, asking why she would say such things to me, and pleaded for an apology, inquiring how she thought I would feel. She refused to respond, simply turning her head away and ignoring me. I kept asking, and she continued to blank me. My mother also informed her that what she said was inappropriate and questioned her motives. At their home, she told her husband and my fiancé that I had attacked her by shouting. They pressured me to apologize and humiliated me again for raising my voice, but they remained oblivious to the pain I was experiencing, even as I cried extensively about how deeply it hurt. I never received an apology or acknowledgement from my husband's parents or from him. It troubles me greatly that I was never understood. With his panic disorder, his mother has become excessively protective, and our communication has deteriorated, leading to misunderstandings that resulted in distressing phone conversations. Recently, she shouted at me, suggesting that I should see a psychiatrist and implying that my husband's condition is my fault. This is absolutely false. He exhibited symptoms of derealization starting in his teenage years, but he never recognized it or communicated this to me. His mother's attacking behavior has left me feeling extremely obstructed. I fear for what the future holds in this situation. I am 35 and a half years old and wish to have a child. This possibility has been taken from me, and although I don't blame him for being unwell, the life I envisioned seems to have vanished, compounded by the fact that I haven't seen him for weeks and have no clarity on when he will return. The time immediately following our wedding was crucial. I desperately craved his attention and affection, which I never received. This has caused me considerable emotional pain that I buried, along with a great deal of frustration and anger for not being able to elicit his desire. I recall one occasion when he put his arm around me in front of his friends, and I remember it vividly because it had been so long since he truly showed me any real attention. The unfortunate reality is that I have completely shut down emotionally for several months, and with him gone, I have become increasingly anxious. I feel a significant sense of loss and cry every day, even if the day itself was mostly fine. I am just in pain and cannot find the love I need to support him, as I feel pushed away and cut off. I know that the root cause is his illness and inability to communicate effectively, but that is still how it feels, and I cannot change that. We communicate through WhatsApp, but sometimes we need breaks to avoid arguments. The state of our relationship is exceptionally poor, and I am uncertain if it will ever improve. I feel trapped in a cage I cannot escape. I love him for who he is, but I no longer feel safe in the relationship and cannot envision a future with a mother-in-law who harbors so much resentment, constantly evaluates my body and character, and exhibits passive-aggressive hostility. I would sincerely appreciate hearing others' insights on the situation and whether they might offer any advice. The resentment is so overwhelming that it hinders my ability to show him genuine love and support. I feel as though I must keep everything bottled up to remain cautious around him, yet sometimes I explode and argue, which only exacerbates his anxiety. I don't want to hurt him, but I simply cannot maintain a normal relationship with him. He does not understand me. Summary: I am a 35-year-old female, and my 34-year-old husband and I recently married, but our marriage has rapidly deteriorated post-wedding. He has started distancing himself and immersing himself in work on his laptop, leaving me feeling neglected and unloved when I needed him the most during this difficult transition. The pain of feeling overlooked by the man I married has been overwhelming, and I harbor significant resentment towards him. He struggles with a panic disorder and derealization and has been at his parents' house in Turkey for 3 months for recovery, with no clear timeline for his return, be it another month, 3 months, or even a year. He is attempting to maintain our relationship and does not wish for a separation, but the situation is chaotic. Story 3. G suis un butch 23 NB. Et G resens de l'atterance pour mon ami mec trans bisexual, 21M. Comment gare une amitié ambiguë. It is a rather particular circumstance, but I met this individual a few months ago, and it transformed many aspects of my life. We were introduced through mutual acquaintances, and we quickly connected over several shared interests, particularly those that I do not typically share with others. Immediately, we established a playful and somewhat childish dynamic, almost like two excited puppies together. This was a type of connection I had previously experienced with another friend, whom I had not spoken to in some time, so it felt rejuvenating to engage in such light-hearted behavior. However, each time we parted ways, the return to reality was challenging. Going back to work and dealing with adult responsibilities felt like, no, let me return. I had to come to terms with the fact that I found him attractive, which troubled me because I identify as butch. Still, I reassured myself that it was acceptable to explore this attraction and see where it led. I continued to spend time with him, and while our interactions were carefree and enjoyable, they began to occupy my thoughts afterward. I felt insecure, unable to discern what thoughts were running through his mind as well as my own. I noticed he often joked about intimate scenarios between us, and we engaged in playful banter that often involved mock conflict, leaving me unsure if this was flirtation or merely jokes. My thoughts began to dwell on this dynamic, but I refrained from expressing my feelings since we were still relatively new acquaintances, hoping that time would clarify things. I also found myself questioning my gender identity. Part of me envied his masculinity and did not want him to perceive me as a woman if our relationship deepened. It is important to mention that he is a trans man who presents as very masculine, even though he has not undergone certain procedures. He identifies as bisexual in a way that initially confused me, resembling the bisexuality expressed by my non-binary friends, which added to my contemplation. As time went on, we began to hang out just the two of us, which was genuinely enjoyable. The first time I stayed over at his place, I was pleasantly surprised by my comfort level. I typically find it very unsettling to sleep in the same space as a man, but I had no issues that night and even slept deeply. Our friendship developed significantly as we shared intimate thoughts, particularly regarding our gender identities. I opened up about my uncertainties, and he expressed that he could relate because he does not fully see himself as a man and desires to have a non-binary presentation. We spent countless nights discussing these subjects well into the morning, wandering the streets searching for amusing things to do or watching silly series at his home. We also discovered many similarities in how we navigate relationships, both platonic and romantic, and discussed these matters extensively. Our conversations about sex revealed another area where we shared much compatibility. We both have a tendency to avoid getting too close to others, often fearing we might hurt them. We both struggle to believe that people can genuinely love us. Generally, I noticed that our shared traits lean towards somewhat toxic behaviors. The difference, however, is that I am constantly self-reflective and can become overly fixated on people I like before truly getting to know them. He, on the other hand, often feels dissociated and therefore lacks clarity regarding his emotions and motivations. Since we became acquainted, I have experienced various mindset shifts. Sometimes I convince myself that our swift connection is merely brotherly. I felt this way until recently, when I became homeless for a period, and he kindly allowed me to stay with him until I secured new housing. Living together for 2 weeks was initially uncomfortable for me, given the relative brevity of our acquaintance and my unstable mental state. I found myself frequently paranoid and dissociative, merely trying to maintain an ability to go to work and manage basic daily tasks. Nevertheless, Spending so much time together proved enjoyable for both of us, and our bond deepened, even physically. Due to being autistic and having past trauma, I generally struggle with physical touch, reserving it for those I feel closest to, and even then, I maintain some boundaries. He is aware of this, and I sometimes sense he refrains from getting too close to me. However, we began resting our heads on each other's shoulders and holding hands for a little too long while gazing into each other's eyes until one of us eventually looked away, embarrassed. We also joke about kissing from a distance, which gets closer each time. He consistently makes jokes about us engaging in sexual acts. Yet he shares this behavior with other friends as well, as it is simply the nature of our humor. Nonetheless, I occasionally sense that there may be more meaning behind these jokes. I could sense the tension building again, but I refuse to allow myself to fully contemplate or act upon it since my housing situation was already precarious enough, and I did not want to complicate it further. A mutual friend accompanied us to a party recently and mentioned that our dynamic was noticeable from the outside, although she does not know him well. Our mutual friends who have known him longer mentioned that even they struggle to decipher what he is thinking. Now, I have been in a new apartment for 3 days, which is conveniently right next to his, and he is moving to another city on the opposite side of the country in a week. Therefore, I realize that since I am no longer living with him, I must address the situation before he leaves because maintaining distance will complicate things further. We have already arranged for me to visit him in his new apartment during my upcoming vacation, but I hesitate to visit another city for a week if our relationship remains ambiguous. Thus, I need to have a conversation in the coming days. We discuss our interpersonal relationships and struggles frequently, but we have never truly addressed the relationship between us, as both of us find that subject challenging. I am grappling with the difficulty of his impending departure and fear losing touch, though I recognize that such thoughts are irrational and that an honest conversation would likely bring me reassurance. Additionally, I dread making myself vulnerable and worry that he may be unable to reciprocate. I proposed that we meet during the week without indicating that it was intended for a serious discussion, as I dislike the notion of causing unnecessary stress. His response was somewhat vague, stating that he could not commit to a specific day due to being overwhelmed with preparations for his move, yet he assured me that we would definitely see each other since we are neighbors. So here I am. I am uncertain whether I should send him a message emphasizing that I have things to discuss with him. I don't know if I should wait for him to reach out again for a meet-up. I am unsure what I will say when we do connect. I also do not know what to do if we cannot meet during the week. The situation is weighing heavily on me, adding stress to my moving process, and after a long period of dissociation, I now feel all my emotions more acutely, especially the sadness of his departure. In summary, I would like to resolve this issue as swiftly as possible. Has anyone else experienced a similar situation and have any advice for me? Story 4. Being accused of incest by my BF, I am innocent, and there is no reason for him to think so. 19F and 20M. Why would he do this? Long story short, he has been my ex since September of last year. Moved from South Africa to Australia, I was in a long-distance relationship with someone I cared for deeply. We met in college and fell in love. We were separated when my mother decided to relocate our entire household to another country within a month rather than a year. I was 19 and did not have sufficient time to devise a plan to stay instead of leaving. He was an incredible and beautiful individual. I had never encountered anyone like him. His energy provided me with peace, and he cherished me for who I was. Being with him felt like a constant dream. It was extremely hard to part ways with him. We decided to embark on a long-distance relationship, and he intended to move after completing his studies. The move was traumatic and abrupt, to put it mildly. Long distance, it was challenging, but we managed to make the most of it with the shared aspiration of reuniting. After several months of being apart, approximately 5, he began preparing for his move. Enduring the waiting and sacrificial process of organizing everything to relocate to another country was soul-crushing. Neither of us received a great deal of understanding for our situation from friends or family. The most frustrating part was waiting for the visa, as there was no indication of when it would be approved. Our relationship faced considerable strain, and he was under a lot of stress, juggling exams and relocation preparations. I set aside my own needs and stress to support him and be empathetic towards his situation. He spent less time with me and became quite distant. I understood how stressful relocating to another country could be and recognized that he needed more time with his family and friends. As I mentioned, my own needs were entirely overlooked, but I reassured myself that it was temporary. Most appalling experience of my life. Note we had a 9-hour time difference. One night, we were on one of our video call dates. During our date, my brother entered my room to invite me to a performance in the park. I politely declined because I didn't get to spend much time with my boyfriend, ex, and could sense my ex's irritation. We were having such a wonderful time on our date that we ended up falling asleep next to each other. I neglected to charge my phone, so it died around 3 a.m. I awoke, texted him good morning as usual, and started preparing for church. I noticed he seemed curt with me and called to check if he was all right. He quickly replied no and said that he felt genuinely unsettled. I asked him why, and he claimed that he overheard things during the call the previous night. I felt embarrassed, thinking perhaps I had spoken in my sleep. He appeared to be worried that I was cheating or something similar. I was completely asleep that night and heard nothing. I spent an hour reassuring him that there was nothing to worry about. We had never had trust issues before, so I believed my reassurances would suffice and that the matter was resolved. That night we spoke again, and as I was about to go to bed, he began an argument out of the blue. I quickly inquired why he was acting this way. He claimed it was related to what had occurred the night before. I asked him again what had happened, and this time he added that he heard both a male voice and a female voice. I spent 3 hours on that call trying to grasp his perspective while thinking of explanations and reassuring him. I eventually fell asleep at 2 a.m., needing to get up for college at 7 a.m. I thought that after our lengthy conversation, the situation would be resolved. However, that night when we called again, the same thing occurred. Just as I was ready to sleep, he began to argue with me again. We discussed it once more, and this time he claimed he heard sexual sounds. It felt increasingly like he was accusing me rather than merely discussing what he had heard. I reassured him yet again and said I was finished discussing it, 1 a.m., and wished him good night. I woke up at 7 a.m. for work. After texting him good morning and wishing sweet dreams, he called me. I interrupted him immediately when he tried to bring up the subject again because I was exhausted from discussing it. He persisted, saying he just wanted to ask one question. What he asked next knocked the wind out of me, and I quote, "Are you physically involved with your brother?" I was at a loss for words. I was utterly horrified. I simply responded along the lines of, "Never speak to me again, that is messed up," and I ended the call. I don't know why I didn't simply say no. I guess I just could not fathom that he could view me in that manner. There are no words to convey how I felt that day. I managed to get through work but felt awful. He didn't text or reach out. At 6 p.m., I texted him to call me at 9 p.m. that evening. He replied, "I thought you never wanted to talk to me again." We spoke, and he looked at me with contempt. Pure hatred. He immediately stated he wanted to break up. I proceeded to beg him not to. I was sobbing. Pathetic, I know, but everything was just unbelievably messed up. I recorded this conversation to have proof of the accusation if needed. It was just so repulsive. I called a friend for advice, who also has a brother, and she suggested perhaps he was just comfortable enough to ask and wanted reassurance because he cared. She mentioned it might have been interference on the phone line that caused confusion since it was an international call that lasted for hours. I chose to be understanding and buried it somewhere deep inside. We stayed together after this incident. He never apologized or tried to comprehend the pain I endured or discussed it. He ended the relationship 20 days later via text without any explanation before we had a chance to see each other. This occurred more than a year ago, December 2023. It was not the end, and we reconnected again, with more events transpiring, but I will leave it at that for now. He continues to believe the accusation to this day. I was merely sleeping, and there was nothing untoward happening. I have always been loyal and truthful. It's incredibly unjust and heartbreaking that this occurred. Someone I cared for so deeply could think something like that. I simply do not understand it. It makes no sense to me. It was an extremely painful experience that continues to haunt me. I have healed somewhat and am doing my best to forgive and move on. I want to uncover the truth. I long for him to know my truth so deeply. I have tried everything. I want to understand what occurred and why he would act that way without cause.